the story that I was telling you before, I finally remembered I remembered the tease. See, I was going to do a tease for this particular topic, and the tease was my big butt, because I consider myself mostly a small government-minded person. Keep the government out, just let things happen, don't big brother this and everything like that. However, I am in favor of the government telling you that you can't run commercials during your news programs. And we started off on a conversation on this, and actually a couple weeks ago, I think we even started talking about it on a Thursday night out in East Hampton. But what is your thought? Going back to the rule, originally the FCC had the rule, right? That was you could not actually do ads during your news broadcast.
Well, it kind of all starts from FDR, World War II.
Right.
He noticed what Hitler had achieved with the use of the power of the media then, which was radio.
Right.
So he decided that too much power over too many people wasn't good for society as a whole. So he formulated the FCC, which was regulations of the radio, and this new form of media that was coming out, which was television.
And the old media, too, because they would say you couldn't own more than one radio station, one TV station, and a paper.
Exactly. If you had too much control over a people, you could influence them the same way that Hitler did. And a lot of the German people were fooled by the propaganda that was put out. And since one man controlled everybody, and it's kind of funny because that's what we have today.
See, now that's where the point that I was getting to. Okay, go.
Yeah, so when the FCC was formulated, one of the rules was that with this new form of media, television, that they had to take a break every 6 hours, a 30-minute break. Now, what do? They just went off the air. It was the old Indian, the big, bullseye. And so they were trying to figure out what to do with that. And the local station said, well, let's give out some information. And they became informing the public of events that were going on, which soon gave birth.
I thought it was immediately to inform the public. So
nope.
I thought that was the whole point of the actual breaks.
No, the break was they didn't want nonstop.
Right.
They had to have a break, and they didn't know what to do with the break. They didn't know what to do with the time. When it originally started, It was just that Indian and that tone. It would go off the air and then come back on.
Okay.
So the stations around the country got the idea, let's talk to the local citizens about the weather, what's been going on. And it was mostly positive, upbeat, informative information that was a public service. It became a public service, which eventually gave birth to the title News.
Okay.
So they had the 12 o'clock and the 6 o'clock break, which basically became our 12 o'clock, our afternoon news, and our 6 o'clock news. And these announcements were informative. They were not sold because you could not sell advertising during this time like you could during other times, other shows.
So then later on they come in with the whole idea of I remember the old FCC regulations was you had to do so much public service per week. That's why on Sunday mornings you used to have all these big talk shows that were always recorded ahead of, during the week. You'd take your newscaster, because back when rock and roll radio used to have a news program, and you'd have a news director, and that person usually went out and just brought somebody in and said, okay, we'd just talk about this for a half hour, chop it up, put it on a reel-to-reel, and then call it a day.
Exactly. And you look at things, and you look back in the day, it was all done locally. It was sponsored by the local television station like WFSB, and we had, Fox came in later, but
they didn't have a news program. They had no news at all.
No, Fox was a news station, but our station, I was trying to remember, CBS, we had NBC, and we had ABC. Those were the three, basic formats. And television and radio, which is a very powerful tool, can be very helpful for society and a community and promote a civilized, society.
And an informed electorate.
And, let's not go to politics.
That's what we're doing here on Sundays, and it's got some traction. People are really interested in it. Sometimes it gets a little, people get passionate about their ideas and such, but, that's what we're trying to do here.
But that's what you need to do, though, because you have to hear the opinions, and sometimes you have an informed opinion, and sometimes people have a passionate uninformed opinion.
But it's still an opinion.
It's an opinion, and we're all entitled them. The problem is, in today's media, the passionate, uninformed opinions seem to be taking the front stage because now we have to sensationalize our spots because we want to sell advertising. And that advertising generates profit. And when you sell news for profit, it only promotes that sensationalism, and the actual facts and the informative public service is kind of getting buried underneath. And
all right, let's go forward a little bit with the conversation though, and say that we did. I know you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube kind of thinking, but say for the sake of argument that they agree with us. All of a sudden, then they go, okay, we're not going to rate the news programs. Say the national news can't be sold at any way. Do you think that would change the way that they were attacking it, and would it ever go back to less slants on the news? Because let's face it, everybody's got their slant on the news.
The only way to take the slants off the news and the sensationalism is to remove it for profit.
But I'm not sure that would still even accomplish what I was actually trying to get accomplished in my brain. Like I'm not sure that would. They'd still have their slant, I think. I still think that a station still has an idea as a company, even though they're not profiting from that 30 minutes. I think they'd still be spinning it.
I mean, I think that's going to be really hard to ever, like you said, put the toothpaste back in the tube. However, I don't agree completely on that analogy because I think we can go back. I mean, let's go back to the 1890s, the Industrial Revolution, Theodore Roosevelt. All right, we had all these people that were becoming bloody rich, okay? And he basically took his executive powers in 1901 and he put his foot down and he broke up the monopolies. Why? Because he said that monopolies don't serve society. They don't serve society as a whole. They're not good. They actually, what's the word? They stifle, they strangle opportunity. And that's what America's supposed to be, is opportunity. So he started the whole ball, and he was a Republican, went against his party. He went against all the J.P. Morgans, Vanderbilts, Rockefellers, Carnegies, and he broke them up. He broke the banks up. He wrote the regulations, all right, that started the ball, and then FDR added to regulations, which built our middle class. And FDR started the FCC. I think you can say, you know what? We've done this 30-year experiment, and we find that it's not good. We're going to go back to regulating it, and this is the way it's got to be. Sorry. And we've got to break the medias up. We got to break up the national things and break it up into zones.
Okay, well, that would have to happen. If you just said you couldn't profit from the news right now in that 30 minutes, you still have the company that's there.
Yeah, no,
so
you can't
you've got to
just
break
say
up
that.
the company in order to do that.
You're absolutely right.
And
you
I don't
actually
know
have to break it up.
Like, who's going to ever agree to do that? Because why? Because if you're running for office, you need dollars to get into office. So, and you're using these companies in order to get that. So I don't know that anybody's ever going to go and say, you know what, this just isn't
Theodore, at his time, he stood up. We just need a stand-up guy that represents the people and not money.
But how's that going to happen? I just don't. I hate to be like the doom and gloom, the sky is falling and everything like that. But
people asked that, I think, in the 1890s. How's this going to happen? Basically, the workers then were just paid slaves. All right, they had no benefits. They paid them less than minimum wage. Work conditions were terrible. People thought the same thing then, and I believe that if you have that attitude, how is it going to happen? And this can never happen. Then, we've already defeated the opportunity for it to happen. But if enough people keep saying we need to make this change,
prophecy, you say?
It's a self-fulfilled prophecy. But if we get enough people saying that we need to do this change, we need to make this happen, then somebody will stand up and will get the support that, you know what, we need to go back to that, because if America is to continue to be great, we have to have opportunity.
We need to make America great again?
Opportunity. Hey, look, neither candidate said one word about this.
Right. But I think that's what people were hoping for with Mr. Make America Great Again.
Yeah, but he never said how he was going to do it, and I don't want to get into he and she, but bottom line is both candidates never said how they would make America great again.
What I keep thinking when you're talking about, going back to the old rules of the FCC and everything, but those radio stations or even television stations are competing with cable news. Cable news is what really rules, and they're all competing against that. So the change is a steeper climb than it was back in the 1890s, which is why I think Curt's saying, well, how are we going to get past this, or how can we do it? Because we have so much more against us today than we've ever had before.
That's a good point, Steve. But remember, cable news was the birth from the deregulation. If you take the regulations and say, we need to re-implement them, we got to break this up, no more 24-hour news, no more this, no more that.
Well, that's an interesting point, because if you get to say,
Now
okay,
you're
your
not
news
competing.
program can't profit from news, and your 24-hour news, that's kind of a big deal.
But cable news is not regulated by FCC.
It isn't now.
Oh,
Cable, you got to remember, cable emerged from this deregulation.
right, but you
the
can't.
cable
yeah,
news.
I think what he's saying is that you can't just kind of go and say to these companies, "Yeah, you guys are done. We're basically shutting you down."
We're making you guys nonprofit now because you can no longer have commercials. There's so many billions of dollars involved. That's why I think with Curt saying that's never going to happen. There's just way too much money. The rich run everything, and it'll never happen.
Well, why they run everything is because the deregulation allowed it to happen.
Well, yes, because the people we elect
That doesn't
in
mean
office.
we can't say, you know what? And if the people, why can't we do it? I mean, Theodore stood up against the banks. The banks were powerful, like today, like the
Right.
media, and he broke them up. He said, my executive orders were breaking them up. They were millions and millions to be lost.
Right.
All right, so what if we did this with the idea of the regulation, though, and said, to the cable companies can still run their programs as they see fit and make profit off them, but at this time, at the 6 o'clock, at the 12, that's when you have to do.
But not 24 hours.
Right. You
because
inform the public. You can't profit from
I
it
see where you're going.
for that half hour.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the time, whatever you want to do, however you want to make your
that
money,
way
that's fine.
we can define that, okay, during this period, this is actual factual news. This is actually not alternative facts, which I think is a joke.
Would actually create more jobs, because you'd have to have an entirely different staff go out and
Well, there
collect
you
your
go.
facts.
See,
and
now
have a
we're
news
thinking
department.
progressively in a manner. How can we keep the ball rolling and not hurt part of the economy? That's a good idea.
Then if you have a bigger staff, if that job demands a bigger staff, where's the money coming in from?
Well, but okay.
From their advertising during the regular, but the sensationalism for news stops. Now you won't have half truths. You won't have lies. You'll have information.
You'll have it in
you'll have a public service
on your slanted program after you.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
And people will know that when I'm watching it now, this is like it was back then. When you watch television, you didn't believe everything on television, although some people did. And they had ads.
They still
for these,
do now.
They had ads for these TV shows, right?
Right.
But when that half-hour slot came, we knew that now it was down to brass tacks. Okay? It's nuts and bolts. This was real. And the characters of, and the personalities of these reporters it was credible. You believed. Now, and with the president today putting down the media the way he's doing, which is kind of counterproductive, but it's also getting him the media exposure. Because anytime that you stand out and say, it's almost like the shock jock.
Yeah.
That same kind of principle. But when you put down a media, if you beat it down enough, you discredit it enough, it gets eliminated. Eventually, there's only going to be one left. And we keep allowing this to happen. We could be going back into that same kind of pattern that happened back in the 30s in Germany. You might think that this is crazy, but it's not. We're not that far from it. There's 4 people in this country that own all the media. That's wrong. There's 330 million people in this country, and that's too much control over too many people.
I completely agree. But once you have a president who's beating down the media, and that's the only thing that's on the news, they just feed each other.
I know. And what we're doing is just self-perpetuating this problem.
Right, but in 4 years, that president may be gone, but the media is still going to be there doing their slant because their sponsorships tells them basically what horse they're going to be backing in any presidential election.
Yeah.
Because they're all bought and paid for.
It's a tough conundrum.
Yeah.
All right, interesting conversation. It's a random Music Tuesday. It's a random
Conversation
conversation Tuesday as well. And now we're going to pay some bills. This is The Beat.